All right, let's just dive right in. We are living in an age of just unbelievable technological speed. But what if the ethical blueprint for how we navigate all this wasn't written in Silicon Valley, but in an ancient scripture? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty fascinating theory that connects history, math, and divine revelation to offer a guide for our super modern world.
I mean, just think about it for a second. You've got artificial intelligence that's literally reshaping our society, biotech that can edit the very code of life. Innovation is moving at a breakneck pace. But are we even stopping to ask the right questions? Is all this progress actually making us better, or is it just making us more powerful? The speed of it all often just blows past our ability to think about the ethics, leaving us in totally uncharted territory with no map.
Well, a really compelling new theory suggests that a map does exist. It proposes that a divine blueprint for technology has been there all along, woven right into the fabric of history through these prophetic cycles, and it's embedded in a stunning mathematical code inside the Quran itself. Now that is a bold claim, so let's break it down piece by piece.
Okay, so the first piece of this whole puzzle is this idea of a recurring historical pattern. The theory says that human civilization goes through a predictable, three-phase cycle in its relationship with technology. And this cycle is represented by the stories of three key prophets.
So this cycle kicks off with Adam, the first human. He represents the creation phase, where all that foundational knowledge and ethics are first laid down. Then it moves to Idris, a prophet who's associated with writing and science. He symbolizes the development phase, where that knowledge gets organized, systematized, and built upon. And then finally, it gets to Noah, whose story of the Great Flood represents a reset. A really dramatic, but maybe necessary course correction for a civilization that has completely lost its way.
Let's dig into what each phase really means. The creation phase, that's all about establishing the ethical why behind our technology. The development phase is about building the how, the systems, the science, the documentation. But that reset phase, that's a huge warning sign. It happens when technology gets detached from its moral foundation and is used for pure arrogance. And that leads to some kind of societal collapse or crisis that forces humanity to start over, hopefully a little bit wiser this time.
So if that historical cycle is the framework that kind of outlines the problem, this next part of the theory claims to be the key that unlocks the solution. And it's this idea of a deliberate mathematical structure hidden in plain sight right inside the Quran. Let's see how this piece of the puzzle fits in.
This is a really powerful statement from the famous scholar Imam Shafi'i, and it just highlights the incredible importance of a very, very short chapter, the 103rd chapter of the Quran, called Al-Asr. It's only 3 verses long. But according to this theory, its structure is deeply, profoundly significant, and it is absolutely not an accident.
Okay, now this is where things get really wild. Look at the unique word count here. The first verse has just one single word. The second verse, it has 4 words, and they describe humanity's default state of being in loss. And then the third verse has 9 words, and it lays out the 4 conditions for salvation: having faith, doing good deeds, and encouraging each other towards truth and patience. You see the pattern emerging, right? 1, 4, 9.
So what happens when we string those numbers together? 1, 4, 9. Well, the theory proposes this is not a random sequence at all. It's a coordinate, a pointer. It's an address, almost like a divine hyperlink, pointing us directly to chapter 104, verse 9.
And this just lays out the connection so clearly. Surah 103 gives you the formula for success, for spiritual salvation. And the theory argues that its 149 structure mathematically points you to the very next chapter, Surah 104, and specifically to its 9th verse, which describes the ultimate consequence for those who reject that formula. It's like a built-in commentary system, a perfect pairing of the solution and the consequence. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so if the historical cycle is the problem and the code is the key, what door does it unlock? I mean, how does this ancient blueprint apply to AI and biotech in our lives right now? Well, that brings us to the practical application, a really powerful ethical framework.
At the very heart of this framework is a concept called Maqasid al-Sharia, and you can think of it as the ultimate mission statement behind Islamic guidance. It's not just a list of do's and don'ts, it's about achieving 5 core goals, all centered on one thing: protecting and promoting human well-being.
And these 5 objectives are the preservation of faith, of life, of intellect, of family, and of property. So, according to the theory, any technology we create, any of it, should be judged against this checklist. Does this new AI preserve human intellect, or does it make it weaker? Does this biotech innovation preserve life and lineage with dignity? These questions become the ultimate ethical guardrails to help us avoid that dreaded reset phase.
So this creates two very different paths, right? You can see the contrast. So much of our modern tech is driven by market demand. The goals are efficiency, profit, power, and accountability. Well, that's mainly to the shareholders. But this proposed divine approach, it just reorients the whole process. The goal becomes human well-being. The driver is a set of clear ethical objectives, and accountability expands to all of humanity and to a divine purpose.
And you can see how this applies directly to the biggest innovations happening today. For artificial intelligence, it means we can never outsource our moral choices to a machine. Humans have to stay accountable. For biotechnology, it shifts the focus from "can we do this?" to "should we do this?", putting the priority on healing instead of creating new kinds of genetic inequality. And for green technology, it frames protecting our planet not just as a nice idea, but as fulfilling a sacred trust.
So all of this, the historical cycles, the mathematical codes, the ethical objectives, it's all building toward a really radical reframing of technology itself. And it leads us to one final, pretty provocative question.
And it's really important to get this. This theory is not anti-technology. Not at all. Far from it. It's about infusing our technology with a sacred purpose. It argues that when we build and create and innovate with the intention of upholding human dignity and preserving the world, well, that act of innovation itself becomes a bridge between the material world and the spiritual one. It can even become a form of worship.
And that leaves us with a fascinating thought to chew on. In our endless quest for progress, we tend to separate our scientific achievements from our spiritual lives. But what if they were never meant to be separate? What if this theory is right, and our greatest technological advancements could, and maybe even should, also be our most profound expressions of faith? Definitely something to think about.